Hello students, I'm back, and in today's lesson we're gonna move to a little more advanced approach to integrate our theme and Gutenberg, so stay tuned. So far we already know how to basically use the tool, we know how to add support to some advanced features, but there's still something missing. Well, don't you agree with me that it would be perfect if everything we see in Gutenberg is exactly the same we got in the front end? Or at least if both Gutenberg and the front end had a look which would be as close as possible. For example, I see that the fonts used here in Gutenberg are not the same fonts my theme is using. Is that possible? Yes, it is. In fact, that's one of the goals of Gutenberg. The idea is that theme developers can also, if they wish of course, style each block and also Gutenberg's own editing area so that what we see here can be as close as possible to the theme's front end. But that's optional according to the WordPress documentation. Theme creators can, if they wish, use blocks as they are without any additional style. Overriding the default styles could bring a really cool experience to the end user, but of course, this can also mean more things to be done and considered by the developer. Taking as an example the Atomic Blocks theme that I mentioned earlier in one of our lessons, they only needed 2 CSS files with a few lines each to modify Gutenberg in a way that it would look like the expected result in the front end. The purpose of this lesson is not to do the same thing here in our theme. I'll just show you the best way. And from then on, if you think you want that in your project, you already know where to go, okay? So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to create a separate style sheet. That CSS file will be used only in the WordPress admin area. So here inside the CSS folder, we're gonna create a file called style-editor.css. Now to call this file is really very simple. First, we add one more support called editor styles. This theme support is required for most actions you need to perform in the backend. Now we just need to call a function named addEditorStyle. And we're gonna pass the name of the CSS file we've just created. Don't forget to add the name of the folder, CSS. Now we can write all the CSS that will control the appearance of the editor. Let's try to make it similar to the front end. And we start by defining 3 things. First, the size of the container where the text part of our post is, which is this area here. Then the size for the blocks that have wide alignment. And finally, the size for the blocks that have full alignment. To define these 3 things, we don't need much work. Gutenberg's documentation has all the code we need. We just go there and copy what we want, right? And of course, I'll make this link available to you, okay? The first section with the selector WP block is used to define the total size for each of the Gutenberg blocks. You can set the values you want here in pixels. Let me increase this value a little, for example, 800 pixels. The next lines are for you to define the size of the blocks of the wide and full width type. Here for the wide blocks, you can set the value you want to. Test that out and see what value can give you the best results. In my theme, 1080 was a great pixel value. And we may already see some minor changes. Here, for example, you see that the size of the container is 800 pixels and it's already coming from the file that we created. And let's change this gallery to wide. And if you inspect it, you can also see that the size is 1080 pixels. You can do your test typing the values directly here. and look at the results in the front end until you get what we want. Another thing we can do is make the fonts look also closer to what we got in the front end. At this moment, the font used here in the editor screen is totally different from what we got in the front end. To change that, we have to know what fonts are used in the front end and apply the same fonts to the right elements in Gutenberg. That, of course, will depend on your theme. I'm gonna give an example of how I did on my theme so you understand what to do, okay? First, these are the two fonts I used in my theme. Lato for paragraphs and Oswald for the heading tags. First, let's see what classes we'll have to change in Gutenberg. To speed things up, I'm gonna paste here some CSS again. These are the classes and roles that we need. Up here, I'm targeting the whole editor area with special attention for the paragraphs. As I've already added support for the editor styles in the theme, I can omit this piece here if I want, okay? In fact, I'm gonna get rid of it because WordPress will append this selector automatically in the backend for all of the elements, classes, and ideas that I want to add to the file. And I'm saying that the font is going to be Lato with these margin values. It's the same rule I have in the front-end style sheet, the template.css file, with the addition of these margins. And this one down here is the CSS that controls the post title. Look how interesting. Even the post title can be modified within the editor. And this one uses a different font type. Great, now if we reload Gutenberg. Oh, wonderful! Our text is already very similar to the one in the front end. If we inspect the two elements, you see that they are already styled according to the admin CSS file using the two fonts and margins we defined. And here you can see the class editor styles wrapper, which has been automatically appended. Very cool, right? So that's the idea, folks. Basically, we'll inspect Gutenberg. You'll find the element or block you want to style and add a rule here that target that element in the backend CSS. Your aim is to tweak the backend until it gets as close to the front end as possible. You just need to remember that it's optional, right? If you don't want to implement this, for example, for your client side, you don't really need. However, if you want to make your theme available for download, I recommend you to do at least the basics changes taught here. Some marketplaces such as Envato's Theme Forest require you to ensure that all WordPress core blocks are styled to match the design of the theme or demos. Another requirement is that web fonts are also enqueued. While in my tests, I didn't need to enqueue my two Google fonts, Lato and Oswald, in order for them to display in Gutenberg. Maybe that was due to the browser cache. To really ensure that they will indeed display, go back to functions.php. Let's create a new function. The point here is that this function needs to be fired on a special hook called enqueue block editor assets. And here we're going to enqueue the two fonts in a very simplified way. We call WP enqueue style. We pass the font handle, for example, Lato font. And then the path to the stylesheet file, which we already have here in the CSS file. Let me just copy this here. And now we do the same thing for the Oswald font. A hint: you can add Google fonts using functions as well. Most premium themes do that. I'll leave you, of course, the link with a great tutorial in this lesson too if you want to delve into it. One more interesting thing you can do is to add a support called WP block styles. What it does, it can make the appearance of the block, of the native blocks you have here in Gutenberg, looks the same when you see them in the front end. It's only valid for the WordPress native blocks, okay? For example, let's add a quote here. So as you can see, you have this formatting here. But if you take a look at the front end, you see that it's quite different. But now, if you add that support, let's do it. Now reloading the page. Now you see that the block here looks quite the same as the one we have in Gutenberg. Once more, this is only valid for the WordPress native blocks, okay? Another hint I can give you is that you take a look carefully here at this official documentation, because they are always adding new things, new features, new resources, and you as a developer will learn a lot from them. Well, in the next lesson, we'll close the series with some final considerations. I'll show you some interesting features that I have not talked about yet. So, until next time!